Wait a minute, is that it? That was a silly ending. Yeah, I guess it was. Hang on, let me double check that shit. Oh shit. Huh. Well, all right. Well, all right. What's up? What's up? What's up? What's happening, everybody? Thank you guys for being here. Appreciate the love. Appreciate the support. Appreciate you hitting that like button on your way in or on your way out if you decide you want to leave early. That's cool too. What's up, everybody? What's happening? What's happening? What's happening? Yeah, we missed Friday's show, but now that the winter's coming and things are starting, business starting to slow down a little bit, I'm gonna have some more free time. And I was actually thinking about transitioning to a morning show or a daytime show, and maybe do a 1 hour or 2 hour show Monday through Friday, in hopes that we could build enough numbers up to where I can get enough support and make this my job. I love to do this. I love doing this, man. I love, breaking shit down, explaining stuff, and, reading the political chessboard and uh, kind of theorizing and deciphering what may possibly happen next, or, figuring out why things happen the way they happened before, shit like that. Like I enjoy that. I love that. And what I like about it most is that I'm good at it, because when I make these predictions, they tend to come true. And that kind of reinforces my passion, I guess, for doing this, because every time a prediction that I made comes true, that serves as confirmation that my analysis was absolutely correct. Because the last thing I want to do is be on here giving you guys, like the rest of these assholes, giving you guys fake news and misinformation because I'm not reading the chessboard right. Kind of like those guys that talk about we're going to war with Russia and we'll be going to war with China, and and the dollar's going to collapse and the world's going to end and Jesus is coming back, and all this crazy conspiracy, panic, spookism, and mysticism stuff that they talk about. I'm not I'm not on that. I live in reality and I like to see things for what they are. And I like to read between the lines and try to suss out what's going on beneath the surface, because there's a lot more happening beneath the surface than what we see on the surface. What we see on the surface is just the ripple effects of whatever's happening underneath. And there's a lot of interesting things happening now because the FBI is unusually active with going after criminal groups, criminal gangs, and this bust with the sports betting thing is probably this is the second major illegal gambling bust that I've witnessed in the last, I want to say 90 days, because the first one we heard about was the elected sheriff in Osceola County getting busted for running a gambling ring. And now this gambling ring that just got busted up, it's tied to current and former NBA players, and it involves the mafia families. And I'm gonna try to pull up maybe a YouTube clip or something of the news report so you guys could get the details, because it's pretty interesting stuff. And because it has to do with financial crimes, it leads me to believe that this is all tied to the Doge, to evidence collected from the Doge investigations. Every time you see, because remember, the Doge investigations went on from January to, I want to say, about June. And here we are now, what, July, August, September, October, 4 months, 3 to 4 months later, and we're seeing all these financial crimes being uncovered. So what's that tell you? What that tells me is these financial crimes, because that's what Doge was investigating, these financial crimes or these charges are stemming from evidence collected through the Doge investigations. Now, here's the thing. If Doge was only investigating the government and where they were spending the tax money, how are they finding all these individuals with these private fraud schemes, these private financial crimes, like a gambling ring between former NBA players and mafia families? Like, how would this be tied to the Doge investigations? Well, very simple. If they were politicians or people involved in government who were involved in this gambling bust and they decided to either blow the whistle or they got caught and they snitched or whatever the case may be, as long as there's government involvement, the Doge investigations will then expand into federal FBI investigations or DOJ investigations that exceed the limits of government. So let's say the Doge investigations discovered that there were several politicians involved in illegal gambling and were making unusually large amounts of money, and the money was coming from individuals tied to people involved in the gambling ring. Then that Doge investigation that uncovered this unusual financial activity from the politician, that information will then now be used as a foundation to launch a federal investigation into the private sector operations of the illegal gambling ring. Thus, now we have the major bust of the gambling ring. Now, when it comes to the sheriff in Osceola County, that could have been more directly by Doge because he's an elected official. He's in government. So his head's on the chopping block. Same thing with Letitia James. She is the Attorney General of New York State. And if Doge investigated all the attorney generals all across the country in their investigations and they found this fraud from Letitia James, it's very easy now for DOJ to move forward with the criminal charges, because all they have to do is now collect the evidence gathered from the Doge investigation and move forward with the indictment. And that could explain why this major gambling bust came after Letitia James and after the sheriff in Osceola, because this bust required a little bit more investigating. And I wouldn't be surprised if this gambling ring is actually tied to the gambling ring that was busted up in Osceola County, because we are in the age of information and a lot of betting is done online through internet communications and apps and so on. So if in fact they had some form of digital gambling happening, aside from the physical card games and all that shit, It's quite possible that the Osceola County Sheriff could have been involved, and maybe he's the one that ratted on these guys. But we'll see, because I'm going to do some more investigating into this, because I believe this gambling bust is really going to uncover a lot of shit and expose a lot of people. And guys, we got 24 watching, is what I'm seeing, and I'm only seeing 13 likes. So go ahead and hit that like button, get those likes up. So tonight's topic: FBI makes major gambling bust, ICE finds LA tunnels. Yeah, ICE found tunnels in Los Angeles. Now, this picture here is a U.S. military serviceman. I don't know if it's a National Guardsman and if this is an actual tunnel in LA, but this is the type of stuff that they're uncovering. And even if this isn't from Los Angeles, this is still pretty telling, because for years we've been talking about the military and going into these and clearing these tunnels that were being used for human trafficking, mainly child trafficking. So that's pretty interesting. Now, the other side of the tunnel thing is this: the military and Department of Defense had already known that these tunnels existed. So why are they acting now as if these are new finds? Well, that's because this is the way they're going to publicly disclose the fact that there's tunnels. You see what I'm saying? Because when the military did it, the military cleared those tunnels under classified operations, which couldn't be revealed to the public. So any information pertaining to the tunnels could not be released by DOD, because releasing that information would have confirmed that there are active military operations, which in every active military operation, soon after or while it's happening, no information pertaining to that operation could be released to the public, because it could compromise the integrity of the operation. So it must remain classified. Secrecy must be maintained in order to maintain operational security, I think is the language they use specifically in the documentation. But now that we have civilian forces, government forces that are non-military operating in these same areas, and knowing that these sanctuary cities were basically hotbeds for human trafficking, as discovered by the military in previous raids, the federal forces that are now going in, they now, because they are in the public eye, their operations are being, disclosed to the public, their presence in those places is known, they now have the green light to go ahead and expose the fact that there are actually human trafficking tunnels under these cities. Thus, now, even though those of us who knew about the military operations, we knew about the tunnels, it was never publicly disclosed through any mainstream media or any, mainline media sources. But now it was never disclosed because, again, military ops had to be kept classified. But now that civilian operations are taking place, now they can reveal it to the public, because this is how they're going to carry out the public disclosure. And the reason, and another reason I should say, why they're doing it now and why they're having ICE and the National Guard and those guys go back into these tunnels, is because once the military cleared those tunnels, the operations had at some point had resumed, but not to the level or to the extent that they were before. But they were basically starting over again. It's like when you bust a drug dealer with a bunch of kilos, you take all his money, you break him down to nothing. He goes to prison for a few years. He comes out and he starts over nickel and diamond again to work his way back up again. That's pretty much where these illegal trafficking operations in these tunnels are. They're like fledgling companies that are just starting out again, but they're being snuffed out and nipped in the bud before they can really make any big progress in reestablishing themselves. So it's being broadcast to the public like this is a new find. It's a new discovery. We never knew it was here before because the military was never here. And now the public is going to be fully aware that these underground bases and these tunnels are they're not a secret. They're not a conspiracy theory. It's real life. So, interestingly enough, in my last two shows, this show and the show prior, we got two different forms of confirmation. We got confirmation by the Russians that there is such a thing as a Guantanamo list, which involves American politicians. And now, by way of the federal government, the Trump administration, and his crackdown on illegal aliens and crime, now we have confirmation of the tunnels under these major cities. And of course, there's always more. So, Mamdani, the guy, Zoran Mamdani, that's the guy that's running for mayor of New York City. And he is a stone cold racist, apparently, because he says white neighbors should pay higher property taxes. And of course, they headlined it, "The Price is White." And what's funny to me is, as much as people cry about racism, the only influential people I see literally keeping racism alive are these Democrats and these liberals, whether they be black, whether they be white, whether they be Americans or they be foreigners. As long as they fall on the left side of the political aisle, they have this this need to somehow continue to sell us the idea of racism. And of course, that's for several reasons, because the people who take heed to all the racism talk and actually believe in systematic racism and that there's this group of powerful white people keeping black people and other people of color down and all this shit, that's a way of getting people to mentally self-sabotage. Because as long as they mentally self-sabotage, they'll never build up enough wealth or power or influence to ever be able to challenge the system in a meaningful way. In other words, they'll be rendered ineffective if they were to try to resist. But when you have people that are able to get into private business, build wealth, build, successful companies and organizations, and have a support base and a good reputation and enough funding to launch a political campaign of your own, now you become a threat to the establishment. So they keep you dumb to keep you broke. They keep you broke to keep you powerless, is basically what it is. And part of the play to keep you dumb, broke, and powerless is to keep you believing that the color of your skin actually fucking matters, to the point where people who are of a different skin color will literally go out of their way and risk their lives, their good name, and their reputations in order to prevent your black ass from succeeding. Now, granted, there was a time in this country when that really did happen. And guess who were the racists stopping the black people from succeeding? Democrats. And what the Democratic Party has done is they've essentially put on blackface. They get all these so-called people of color to pretend as if they're there to stop the evil racists. And so everything the Republicans propose, whether it be helpful to the people or not, they call it racist in order to get people to not support it, black and white. And I find it very odd that a cat like Zoran Mamdani is over here in America demonizing white people, expressing openly anti-white racism, and expecting black Americans to side with him in hating white people. So here we have a foreign infiltrator, essentially, continuing to push the narrative to drive a wedge between black Americans and white Americans. As if there isn't enough tension between black Americans and white Americans as it is, thanks to the recent liberal propaganda campaign that's been pushed since Obama. And oddly enough, as the liberals get the black people to cry racism, and play victim, the only real victims of racism, systematic racism I see today are white people. What do you think DEI was? Diversity, equity, and inclusion. Guess who wasn't included in the inclusion? White men. So it's not even anti-white racism against white people in general. It's more targeted at white men. So it's like anti-white racist misandry. And for a group of people, meaning the Democrats and their supporters in society, who claim that they're against racism and they don't like racism and they acknowledge that racism is evil, they seem to be more than happy to engage in that very same thing they claim they disagree with when it comes to a certain specific group of people. So it's like it's not okay to be racist unless you're being racist against a white person. Then that's okay. And I don't see how this inconsistency actually makes sense in the minds of these liberals unless they themselves, at their core, are racist and bigoted. And the first opportunity they get to be able to justify their racism and their bigotry against a certain specific group, they will they will jump on it. They will do it. They will act it out. They will carry it out because that's what's in their hearts. Because there's a lot of people on the other side of the aisle of all colors that are not racist. And although there are groups of people who you can separate by gender, by sexual preference, by race and all that, there's certain groups that we can separate out and play identity politics with. But on the conservative side of the aisle, we only see it one or two ways. It's either you're pro-America or you're anti-America, pro-world government. And what comes with the anti-America, pro-world government agenda is nothing wholesome, nothing pro-human, nothing that benefits the family. What it is it's feminism, it's delusion, it's communism, it's oppression, mentally, physically, and financially. It's lies, deceit, propaganda, racism, everything that we're trying to get away from as Americans. This is what the anti-American agenda is pushing on us. The sexual perversion. And the pro-American agenda is more pro-human, pro-family, pro-life. Everything that the American people as a whole would generally agree with. So how is it that they're able to, that the establishment is actually able to get Americans within America to join the anti-America, pro-world government side of the political aisle? How are they able to do this? Well, it's very simple. It's very simple. They parade around as if they're not anti-America, pro-world government, and they say things as they propose these world government ideas. They frame it in a box to make it sound as if these are things that America needs. This is what's good for America. This will help America. So they project themselves as if they're acting in America's best interest when they're actually doing the opposite. It's absolutely deceptive. And a lot of well-meaning people that genuinely do want what's best for America have fallen for that lie and have fallen for that deception. And they find themselves supporting this anti-American, anti-human ideology while simultaneously in their minds thinking they're on the right side of history and thinking they're supporting what's best for humanity. And it's crazy to watch, and the deception is diabolical. But because this establishment preys on the minds of people who have already been so hopelessly deceived, it's not very hard now to take some Muslim foreigner, inject him into American politics, and have him publicly, openly spreading racism, and him not be canceled and called hateful or anything. Because I'll tell you right now, if it was a black liberal that said this, a lot more people would be up in arms and it would be a lot more noticeable. If it was a white conservative that said this about their black neighbors paying higher taxes, the entire world would be up in arms. Everybody would take notice. But because Mamdani is a perceived person of color, nobody bats an eye. This is okay. It's cool. And this is why they're using those foreigners to push their racism, because America has had enough of hearing these fake ass pro blacks spewing anti-white racism. So it doesn't go unnoticed. You know, people see it and it paints it makes for a bad look, because it raises the question of, well, if you're so upset that your ancestors experienced racism, why are you pushing the same evil that you claim you want to get us away from, but simply pushing it in the opposite direction? Because the black people in America are the historical victims of racism. So every time racism gets brought up, black people are at the forefront as the ones who were the victims of that racism. So when black people espouse racism towards white people, it's more noticeable. But Mamdani is from a group of people who were never oppressed by white people, at least not in America. So why is he being used to help push the anti-white racism? Well, because he's now speaking for the black people that they can't use anymore because, well, they don't have the same, if they're not as effective as they used to be. So they use a different guy from a different culture to push the propaganda that appeals to the black voters, in hopes that the black voters get behind this non-black individual. So much for your black power. There's your black power. Black people being led by the nose by foreigners. You being ruled in your own land by foreigners. And I hate to see shit like this. And it irritates me, right? Because I've had some racist experiences in my life. I know plenty of black people who've experienced some form of racism in their lives, because these are wicked people and these people exist, right? It doesn't mean the whole group is guilty of it, and it doesn't mean that it's as widespread as some would have you believe. But for the majority of my life, I must say that the group of people who are constantly being accused of being racist have shown me love, respect, acceptance, and not a single inkling of racism. So it's hard for me to accept the notion that the majority of white people are racist, or all white people are racist. I know it's false. But what bugs me out is when I see the Democratic Party, that's supposed to be the party of black people, now basically ignoring black people and they've already been shitting on black men since the 90s. So that ain't, the crime bill, remember that? So it's no surprise that it's all black women in positions of power in the Democratic Party, or effeminate woman-like men in positions of power, but no straight free thinking black men though. But it bugs me out to see how they elevate these foreigners to be the leaders of black people, or try to get them to steer black people in a certain direction. And what bugs me out even more is how black people fall for this trick with these damn foreigners. And it would make more sense for the black voters to stop voting for the Democratic Party and vote for patriotic Republicans instead. Because Republicans don't play these kinds of games. Republicans don't get into this racist shit. They don't. So as a black American, if you're trying to get away from the racism, you have to get away from the party of racism. They are so racist that they targeted millions of people in South and Central America to be their new slave class, and pretended as if they were offering them an opportunity to have a better life in America, opened the borders and flooded them in here and gave them some money in hopes that they would become the new electorate to keep them in power. You know how many stories I've seen online? Because remember, guys, these governments that were running these sanctuary cities, they let these people in and they gave them, thousands of dollars a month. Like they treated them better than they ever treated any American. But after a while, those subsidies ran out. So the whole time we were hearing about the illegals getting all this funding, it wasn't like somebody that came here in 2022, hopped the border in 2022, was still getting money in 2025. Eventually it ran out. And then that money was diverted to new arrivals so they can get a piece of the pie and get on their feet. So the money was being dispersed constantly to the illegals, but it was being received by the illegals kind of in waves. And what happened is they never showed you in the media what happened to these illegals once that money ran out and it was then diverted to new arrivals and they stopped getting the benefits. What happened to them is a lot of them ended up homeless on the street. A lot of them ended up in jail. A lot of them ended up trying to go from city to city, working menial jobs, trying to survive. And a lot of them turned to crime. That's the part they don't tell you. And the Democrats knew this would happen because they know how addictive welfare is. So once they started giving these illegals welfare, they also knew that once you get a society hooked on free handouts, once the handout stops, that community essentially collapses. They collapse morally, they collapse financially. And that's exactly what happened with the illegals, boosted up the crime rate. And then you know what happens when the crime rate goes up? These politicians that own or have part ownership in these 501c3 organizations that are supposed to be crime prevention programs, they get large amounts of money from the government as long as there's crime and they can justify the need for their organization to use that funding. And so they use the crime as an excuse to siphon tax dollars out of the government and into their pockets. So in case you were wondering, like, what is it with these Democrats and their hatred for the police and law and order and their love for criminals? Like, what is that about? Like, where's that coming from? Well, it's a lot deeper than them being bought off by some powerful group and the powerful group forcing them to say this shit. It's because they profit directly from the activities of the criminals and their crimes. That's all it is. And as long as that crime doesn't get beyond the gates of their gated communities, they will allow it to go on because they get to live more and more comfortably behind those gates. So when Trump sent in the military to shut down the crime problem and sent in ICE to get rid of these illegal aliens that were basically exponentially increasing the crime rate, this is why those Democrats were so up in arms about it. And they were so angry about it because for a lot of them, they just put a down payment on that mansion and they were dependent on 10 more years of this 501c3 anti-crime revenue to pay for that mansion. For some of them, they got debts to pay and they promised their lenders that with this new money coming in from this crime wave over the next couple of years, I got you. So Trump fucked their money up. And that's why they were so passionate and so mad in the news about Trump doing that. That's where that love for the criminals come from. Because the criminals help put money in their pockets. So you got the criminals in government literally profiting off the criminals on the street. So now there's that unspoken alliance. And that's why the criminals became so emboldened and the crime rates became so high in these certain places. Because the criminals were literally feeding the machine. And that's why the machine had so much pushback when Trump decided that he was going to put the criminals out of business. Another thing they were afraid of is a lot of these Democratic politicians, they are literal criminals, and they have connections to criminal organizations in the streets. And their part of their duty in their loyalty to that criminal organization is to use their power in government to protect that criminal organization so they can continue to operate safely within the confines of that politician's jurisdiction. And if you have an outside force like the federal government coming into this small town or into this city and arresting and jailing these criminals and more than likely interrogating most of them, if not all of them, eventually those ties to those between those criminal organizations and the politicians will be revealed to the federal government. And when that happens, all bets are off. Now, every word they spoke against law enforcement in support of the criminals now can be seen as aiding and abetting a criminal organization. We're talking RICO charges, obstruction, impeding, all kinds of charges that will amount to prison sentences and immediate removal from office. Forced resignation. So they're scared. And for good reason, because what I just described, them being afraid of what's happening, is exactly what's happening. The politicians' financial ties and physical friendships and relationships ties with these criminal organizations is being revealed, and these politicians are now under investigation. Now, Trump's got a very weird way of communicating, but I understand why he does it the way he does it, because we're dealing with an infiltration. So the messages being sent to the patriots all around the world have to be coded in to some degree. Now, this is a Hindu ritual. That's why Kash Patel is there. This is a Hindu tradition that Trump is engaging in, lighting the candles around the whatever that is. And it's symbolic of the forces of goodness declaring war on the forces of darkness, is what it symbolizes. And some ignorant fool here, and this is why the conservatives are having such a problem with pressing forward in this fight against the international Masons and the liberals and the one world government proponents, because there's a lot of ignorance on our side too. There's a lot of dummies on our side that don't know shit, but they have too loud of a voice. And they need to sit the fuck down and shut their stupid ass up, because every time they open their dumbass mouths, they make us look stupid. But anyway, this person says, this is not MAGA. This is not America First. This is not Christian. Well, just because you're a Christian does not automatically invalidate other religions. Okay? That's number one. Because your religion is just as make-believe as any other religion, because none of us were there when those books were written. All we can do is believe. So if you choose to believe and we're supposed to respect your belief, then you have to understand that respect goes both ways. You may not agree with what they believe in, but as long as their belief does not involve calling evil good and calling good evil, what else can you do but respect it? And if they ever so choose to join your belief system because you seem to be a great living example of the benefits of being a part of this belief system, then they'll follow you. That's number one. Number two, Make America Great Again has nothing to do with Christian. It has nothing to do with religion. So this is one of those conservatives that's a diehard Christian, probably a good person at heart, but they lack the understanding that they're no different than the liberals when they expect everybody to adopt their beliefs and they condemn any other beliefs just because it doesn't align with theirs. That's no different than what the liberals do. So if as we sit around and talk about how slow and retarded the liberals are, we have to take a look at our very own conservatives and point out these idiots in our circle too. Because the last thing you want to do is be at war and put a machine gun in the hands of a retard. Theoretically speaking. These are dangerous people. These are false gods and idols. And anybody could say the same for your God, because we know that the Bible is not the real Bible that was written originally. It's nowhere near what the original texts even say. So for this person to sit here and judge these people for their belief systems, make them no different than the bigots on the left. And then they wonder why not so many people are willing to come to their defense in defense of their freedom of religion, because they demonize everybody else's religion. So how are we supposed to defend your freedom of religion when you use your religion as a way to demonize everybody else's religion? See, if there was that mutual respect for one another's beliefs, there would be more unity amongst the religious folks. So when the anti-Christian persecution starts to happen, people of other religions will be more willing to speak up for those Christians and say, hey, this is bad. It won't just be the Christians crying out. But because so many Christians have no respect for other people's religions, that when the Christians start getting persecuted, and the one thing that can help the Christians the most in their fight against that persecution would be the voices from people from other religions speaking out against it, they've essentially cut themselves off from that lifeline by being pious, being pompous, believing that they know the truth and everybody else is believing bullshit, when it could be the other way around. We don't know because we were not there. And this is the same mentality that was prevalent amongst all those conservatives that were in support of Israel genociding the people of Gaza. It was these types of people. And again, when they open their mouths and they talk that religious shit, that religious supremacy, that's what this is. This is religious supremacy. When they start espousing that religious supremacist ideology, it makes all us conservatives look stupid, because for the most part, most conservatives have a healthy belief in a grand creator that we so affectionately call God. And that when we talk about God and our beliefs in God, a lot of it aligns with the Christian principles, the Christian values that are expected by the Christian God. So there is a common thread amongst us conservatives in having a moral code, a moral compass, and a belief in God. But amongst us conservatives, there are those hyper-religious, overzealous religious supremacists that think that only the way they believe in God is the only way. And that's dangerous, because it's too easy for the left to exploit that and use that as a point of division amongst us conservatives. And until these Christian conservatives let go of that religious supremacist ideology, there will always be cracks and division on the conservative side, because as true patriotic conservatives, we don't believe in any form of supremacy of one human being over another. We truly believe all men are created equal. We truly believe that there is one universal grand creator, regardless of what name you choose to call him or how you choose to pray to him. We got to get rid of this Christian supremacy shit. I will not tolerate this nor endorse this. So you won't tolerate other people's belief systems. You see what I mean? That's that religious supremacy. And then this same person will be the first one to turn around and call the left intolerant while they're espousing their own intolerance. And this is not even anything evil that they should be intolerant of. First of all, to tolerate something means that it's something that happens to you often. It's something that you experience often. Thus, you have to learn to live with it. Right? You tolerate it. It's something that's a pet peeve of yours that you have to experience generally something you experience more than once. How many times has Donald Trump done anything like this in the White House with the Hindu religion? This is the first time I've seen anything like this. So you're going to use the fact that Trump lighted some lit some candles in a room that possibly may smell like curry to turn your back on Trump and his attempt to save the entire country from the infiltration that we're under? Really? So your Christian beliefs are so supreme that you would let America burn. You'd rather let America burn than have Trump show some respect to some Hindus in the White House. You see how stupid that sounds? You see how idiotic that is? You see how unproductive to the cause that can be? And do you see how helpful to the left that is? Well, I'm glad I'm not the only one that sees this religious supremacy and is not ignorant to what this ritual signifies. But Manuel Rosado actually told this person what time it was. He says, "You're wrong, Sammy. This is absolutely MAGA. Diwali celebrates the victory of light over darkness." Yeah, that's what it is, a celebration of victory. Good over evil. That is MAGA. Furthermore, MAGA is a very big tent, and all Americans who embrace love of country and liberty are welcome, no matter their religion or lack thereof. Exactly. Because when you start injecting your religion, because all religions come with some degree of exclusivity. So when you start injecting your theology into your political ideology, you then start to lean towards having a theocracy rather than a republic. Because in a republic, the people govern the land. In a theocracy, the priesthood governs the land. And after what we've been witnessing going on in those churches over the years, the last thing we want is church leaders running our country. Because we've seen what a great job most of them have done with their churches. There's very few churches out there that have uncorrupt pastors. And if you find one, you are extremely lucky. Finding a good church with a truly godly pastor is like these days is like being a black man and finding a good, feminine, wholesome black woman that hasn't been ran through and over the age of 30. No offense to black women. But by the time they're 30, most black women have kids. That's what that's like. That's how rare that is. But again, just because you believe in one religion does not automatically invalidate any other religion. And if that's what you think and that's how you feel, you might as well be a liberal. You're no good to us on the conservative side. Because let's say the conservatives managed to get all the Democrats out of office and America is 100% under conservative rule, a conservative governance. Jade Stewart says, shit, I ain't got kids. I said most. Statistically, most. Well, let me say 35. I'll be generous. And that's only because of biology too, because for women, once they reach the age of 35, any pregnancy they experience over the age of 35 medically is considered a geriatric pregnancy. So it would only make sense that most women would have kids before the age of 35. And the only reason why I use black women as the example is because of all the men in the world that complain about their women, I hear the most complaints from black men about black women. That's the only reason why I use black women as an example. And I'm of the belief that 99% of those complaints are legitimate because men generally don't complain. A man would stay in a relationship and be unhappy as fuck, but he'll stay there and he won't complain. So when men complain, you better take heed because it's some bothersome shit. But nevertheless, let's not get off subject. It was just an example. If you didn't like the example, disregard, but don't lose the general idea of what I'm saying, which is Religious supremacy is no different than racial supremacy. The religious division is no different than the racial division. And just like the left uses racism to divide us, on the right, that religious shit divides us, as evident in this post. Well, this post. This is the response to the post. All right, so he goes on to say, sadly, there's a very small percentage of American evangelical Christians who desire a theocracy that would rival the Taliban, and that is not MAGA. And that I agree with. They do want a theocracy, and that's exactly what I was just saying. And what I was also going to say was that if the conservatives get their way, we would still have the same problems with those over religious zealots on the right that we have with these ideological zealots on the left. We would still have the same problems. We would still have disagreements in politics. We would still have extremism in politics. It would just be extremism in the opposite direction. Instead of having what we have now, where people on the right are against abortion, people on the left are for abortion, what we'll have is people on the right who are for women being able to wear whatever they want, and people on the far right saying all women must wear, nun outfits, that type of shit. That's where the debates would go. So it wouldn't solve anything. It'll just pendulum us from the left versus right problems to the right versus the insane far right, because there is an insane far right, and this person is one of them. So just because I support conservatism and I tend to lean more Republican politically, does not mean that I'm blind to the problems on the right. Because if we're trying to win politically, we have to perfect our strategy on the right. And the only way to perfect our strategy is to examine ourselves and find the problems and the weak points in our strategy and correct it. And one of the biggest weak points on the right is this religious supremacy. So Roger Stone posts this, and he says, I just busted a Cuban spy. Cuban intel colonel Yvette Garcia Gonzalez backs WASP spy network and human trafficking of doctors, now in the U.S. seeking asylum. So aside from this, is evident that the open borders thing was much, much bigger than just simply bringing in people from poor countries so they can have a shot at a better life. It was much bigger than poor people, oppressed people seeking asylum. And it was also much bigger than the human and drug trafficking operations that were basically protected by these migrant caravans and covered up behind these migrant caravans. And it's also much bigger than the kinetic sleeper cell forces that will be unleashed on the American public if Trump decided to 100% openly and publicly buck the system without pretending as if he's going along. What was also happening was foreign spies were being brought into the country as well. And this woman is just one of them. And if they were millions of illegals brought in or let into the country, then there has to be, by logic, at least thousands of spies in the country. And could it be that Trump is using the military forces to not only go after the kinetic sleeper cells, but also go after the spy networks? Because I hadn't even thought about this. As in all the shows that I did talking about the sleeper cells being brought in with the migrants, I never stopped to think that, hey, spies are coming in too. I don't know if I ever mentioned it, but I don't recall ever mentioning it, because when I read this, a light bulb went off in my head. Because you see, for a foreigner to enter the country legally, they have to go through a process that involves certain tests, background checks, questions, checks into their previous employment, that type of stuff that could possibly reveal them to be spies, especially if they have direct ties to a foreign government. So if they had the opportunity to get into the country illegally and still have the ability to position themselves to where they can collect the intel they were sent to collect, then that would be a better way of infiltrating the country than going through the process and having yourself documented. Because now you can operate in the country, not be documented, and be on no one's radar because they don't even know you exist. So this does not surprise me. Does not surprise me at all, and it should not surprise you either. Now, if I can only find slide 3. I hate that they don't show up in order. There we go. So, on top of all the interesting things that have been happening with the military, something interesting is happening with DOD and Congress. And guys, please don't forget to support the show. We skipped the promos because I got to scrap the books. The book sales are coming to a close, and I have to find new products to promote. So I just basically skipped the promos tonight. But it still doesn't mean that you shouldn't support the show. So please support the show. I would like to get 10 supporters per show. We have 0 on the board tonight so far, and I'd like to see that change if you don't mind. But DOD now is pretty much cutting off open contact between their personnel and Congress. So battle lines are being drawn between the military and the civilian government, which kind of sparks some concern that the military may possibly be targeting individuals within Congress. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth issued a new memo requiring Department of Defense personnel to seek prior approval for all communication with Congress, including the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Including the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The policy aims to ensure consistency and support for the department's priorities, but critics like MSDNC, Pentagon correspondent Priya Sridhar, another fucking foreigner, say it clamps down on information. Some senators, including Senator Cornyn, are considering holding military nominees as pushback. Now, why do you think Defense Secretary Hegseth is limiting communications between DOD personnel and Congress? Well, if you don't understand why this would be happening or can't think of any possible reasons, think AIPAC. What? AIPAC? Yeah, think AIPAC. AIPAC controls both sides of Congress, both houses of Congress. That will be your House of Representatives and your Senate. AIPAC has put money in the pockets of 95% of Congress members. So if Hegseth is limiting DOD contact with members of Congress who, by 95% probability, I would assume, are under Israeli control, then that indicates to me that certain moves against Israel are about to be made. And Congress can't know about it, because if Congress knows about it, AIPAC knows about it. If AIPAC knows about it, the Zionist regime knows about it, which means the hit teams might be sent on a couple more missions to stop whatever it is that Trump's about to do. So how do you prevent that from happening? You do exactly what this woman here, Priya Sridhar, the MSNBC Pentagon correspondent, what she said here, you clamp down on the information. Right, Barnes. They're moving to stop the leakers. And that means that they're moving to some serious operations in a very short period of time. Now, this is one that speaks volumes. President Trump has threatened to cut off all funding and support for Israel if they even consider annexing the West Bank. Now, I thought Trump had already cut off funding, Citizen Man. Well, Trump had refused several shipments of weapons because of his beef with Netanyahu around the time when he cut off comms with Netanyahu. But the funding deals were still active and still on the table. But the funding wasn't being released. So the funding hadn't been officially cut off. It had been withheld, but it was still basically set aside to be given to Israel. So if you look at the wording here, President Trump has threatened to cut off all funding and support. By cutting off all funding and support, that would mean abolishing the deal or abolishing the deals and no longer allocating any funding or any military support for Israel whatsoever. So Netanyahu has already been basically put on ice. And now the ice box that he's been put in by Trump is now threatening to permanently lock it. And remember, all this comes on the heels of China openly threatening to wipe Israel off the map if they touch any of the Chinese aid ships going to Gaza. So something is definitely brewing with Trump, and I believe the big moves against Israel are about to be made. Now, part of the problem that Trump is dealing with, aside from the Israeli Mossad hit teams, is these leftist, liberal, domestic terrorist organizations that are currently being mopped up by the military deployments in these certain cities. And I believe there's military deployments in all of these liberal cities, but they're operating under the guise of they're operating undercover. They're pretending they're moving around like civilians, and they're gathering intel on these individuals. So when it's time to deploy the military in that city, openly deploy, uniform military in that city, they already have their target list and their possible locations. But ex-Marine, this is from Steve Robinson. He says, ex-Marine Graham Planter taught military tactics, recruited for socialist paramilitary group in Maine. Reddit posts reveal embattled progressive star recruited and provided firearms training for the Maine Socialist Rifle Association. Now, as conservatives, we believe in the Second Amendment, but we believe in responsible gun ownership. And the reason why so many conservatives express concern about these lefty liberals having unfettered access to firearms, as we believe all Americans should, the reason why these people raise concerns is because, one, just to be a lefty liberal, you have to have something wrong with you mentally. And the fact that these people hold the political ideologies that they hold, ones that most of them can't even justify, that is a clear indicator of some sort of mental deficiency. And wherever there's mental deficiency, there's a high probability of lack of intelligence. And where intelligence lacks, violence makes up for. So low intelligence is one of the key components to an individual with a propensity for violence. So the fact that these are low IQ individuals that are already mentally screwed up because of the dumb shit they believe in, they also have a propensity for violence because of their idiocy and their low intelligence. So as conservatives and firm believers in legal gun ownership, when we see a group of people who obviously have mental deficiencies and propensities for violence with lots and lots of guns, it raises concern. You understand? So on the surface, it might seem like, well, aren't you pro-gun, you conservatives? So why are you mad that the liberals got guns? Well, we're concerned because liberals are fucking retards, and retards with guns scare us. That's why. Is that fair to say? And in accordance with YouTube's community guidelines, I am not bullying or harassing any specific groups or individuals. I am simply voicing my opinion in an attempt to educate the public about the thought process of certain individuals. So, or like I said, on the surface, it appears to be hypocritical, but when you really get down to it, these are people. It's almost like you're a pro-gun American, but there's certain groups of people you would rather not allow to have guns, right? Like, let's say somebody that shanked a few people, stabbed a few people, and went to jail for 10 years. And then they get out of jail. And while they were in jail, they were in there stabbing people too. So they've clearly demonstrated a propensity for violence and a low tolerance for frustration. Would you want those people having guns? Probably not, right? Or somebody that's like a serial road rager and everywhere he goes, he crashes out on everybody. Would you want him to have a gun? Probably not. The manic depressives that are always talking about suicide and wanting to kill themselves and not wanting to live anymore. Would you feel comfortable with them having a gun in their hand, in their possession? Probably not. So there are reasonable limits to the right to keep and bear arms. And because these people hold the political ideologies that they hold, and they align with the political party that they align with, being the Democratic Party, this makes them very dangerous individuals. Because political violence is a part of their ideology, a propensity for violence is a part of their nature, and a willingness to want to commit violence has always been part of their verbal expression. We see it all the time. Conservatives debating liberals on the street. The liberal can't justify his position, so he smacks the conservative. Shout out to my brother Nick, the artist, for the Cash App. He says, buy a beer. Appreciate you, Nick. Got one on the board. And it's some of these groups in certain areas, in conjunction with the gangs and the illegal aliens, that make up the hit teams that are slated, that are basically on standby to go out and commit mass violence once the order is given. So these are dangerous people, and they're stupid enough to make themselves known, which to me makes them even more dangerous, because there's a sense of boldness and entitlement there. But speaking of Trump and Israel, this was a post that Donald Trump put out on October 21st on Truth Social. And he says, numerous of our now great allies in the Middle East and areas surrounding the Middle East have explicitly and strongly, with great enthusiasm, informed me that they would welcome the opportunity at my request to go into Gaza with a heavy force and straighten out Hamas. I think that's what he meant to say. He said straighten our Hamas. If Hamas continues to act badly in violation of their agreement with U.S., but it's Israel that's acting in violation, right? The love and spirit of the Middle East has not been seen like this in 1,000 years. It is a beautiful thing to behold. I told these countries and Israel, not yet. There is still hope that Hamas will do what is right. If they do not, put an end to Hamas will be fast, furious, and brutal. I would like to thank all of these countries that called to help. Also, I would like to thank the great and powerful country of Indonesia and its wonderful leader for all of the help they have shown and given to the Middle East and to the U.S., to everyone. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President Donald Trump. So what Trump is basically saying here is that he's formed alliances with other Middle Eastern countries, didn't explicitly say what countries they are specifically, and that they are willing to work with Israel. But Israel doesn't want to work with these countries, and these countries don't want to work with Israel. So what's this really about? Well, if you notice in all of this fluff, because that's pretty much what it is, fluff, there's certain words that have been capitalized. And if you, and this is a coding that Trump has used before, if you go through and you highlight all the capitalized words, it actually says something a little bit different than what you read in the fluff. So let's read the capitalized words only and see what it says. It says, now great allies, Gaza, not yet, fast, furious, and brutal. USA to everyone. President Donald Trump. So who would be everyone? That would be the rest of the world. USA to the rest of the world. And how does the rest of the world feel about what Israel's been doing in Gaza? They know it's a genocide. They detest Israel for doing it, and they want it to stop. So they're in opposition to Israel, right? Get this. Now great allies, Gaza. So what does that mean? Does that mean the U.S. is great allies with Gaza? Not necessarily. It could also mean that Gaza has allies great allies in the rest of the world. I mean, didn't China just threaten Israel with total annihilation if they touch their aid vessels? And China would be a great military ally to have because they have a really large, powerful military. So now great allies, Gaza. So that's great allies of Gaza. That means other powerful nations in the world. And he says, not yet. What does he mean by that? Well, if he's speaking to the allies of Gaza and he's saying not yet, I presume that he could be saying, don't attack Israel yet, because I still got some loose ends to tie up here in the United States before you guys go after Israel. Because you see, excuse me, when the Zionist regime and the Rothschild banking system is finally taken down, it will be taken down by the BRICS nations rather than by the U.S. All the U.S. is going to do is pull the plug on Israel and stand back and let it happen. So Trump is saying not yet, as in now is not the time to strike yet. Fast, furious, and brutal. So he's saying don't strike yet, but when you do, make it fast, furious, and brutal. Okay? And it's signed USA to everyone, President Donald J. Trump. Everyone. Who would be everyone? That goes back to the top. The now great allies of Gaza. So if China is openly threatening Israel, Iran is threatening Israel. What other nations? Egypt actually had some harsh words for Israel, and the rest of the BRICS nations, Syria, is really in opposition to Israel. The Arab Emirates are in opposition to Israel because Israel just bombed some shit on Qatari soil. So now they're all against Israel. So if they're against Israel, they are allies of Gaza. So it seems like Israel's annihilation is on the horizon. So you have the Secretary of Defense basically cutting off communication between the military and the AIPAC-controlled Congress. You got Trump threatening to cut off all support to Israel. You got China threatening to annihilate Israel. You got the Zionist regime getting exposed more and more here every day. You got the Charlie Kirk incident where the FBI is going after some of these hit teams and this organized crime amongst the Zionist regime here in the United States. You got the Doge investigations and DOJ going after Zionist puppets in the government. And now you got Trump basically turning on the yellow light for the rest of the world to point their guns at Israel by saying not yet. So the light's yellow. It ain't turned green yet. I mean, the light's red. Sorry, I said yellow light. The red light. So the light's red, and eventually, at some point, it will turn red and turn green. And once they're greenlit to go after Israel, the attack on Israel will be fast, furious, and brutal. You see? So when Trump puts out these statements that make you scratch your head and go, I wonder why he's playing this role. Well, there's some coding in it, and you have to decode it. And when you decode it, it will be the total opposite message. Now, isn't that interesting? All right, we have to find slide 7 now. There it is. Now, remember what I said about these Democrat politicians and their love for crime because they're involved with the criminals and they profit from the crime? Well, AG Pam Bondi, U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi, announces investigations into Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, Lori Lightfoot, and others for targeting ICE agents. Lightfoot is being immediately instructed to preserve all documents related to her actions. It appears she is violating the law. You cannot disclose the identity of a federal agent, where they live. Pritzker, same ball game. If you're telling people to arrest our officers, you're impeding. Remember when I did that whole stream telling you guys that these politicians and these groups that are being funded and organized to impair ICE's ability to do their job, one of the federal crimes they'll be charged with is impeding. We looked at obstruction and impeding. You're impeding. We will charge them. If they think I won't, they haven't met me. We will protect our federal agents. This is Pam Bondi's words. Pam Bondi said it. They're impeding. So months ago, hang on a second. So months ago, I did a stream explaining and breaking down all the crimes that these people who are aiding and abetting the illegals could possibly or would possibly be charged with. And here we are today, the U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi expressing publicly that this is the exact crime. One of those crimes is the exact crime that the governor of Pennsylvania and the former mayor of Chicago is being investigated for. And if they're on the chopping block, that means there's other high-ranking politicians in other cities that are going to be on the chopping block as well. Because Pritzker, Lori Lightfoot, even Brandon Johnson, they're not the only ones that have done this. So the ball is rolling on that. And once those arrests start happening, you best believe Citizen Man is going to be front and center with the news. But shit's getting dicey because now that the governor is under investigation, I guess Illinois has a governor race coming up. And Fox News reports that Illinois GOP governor candidate loses son and daughter-in-law, 2 grandchildren in a helicopter crash. So they're so desperate to stay in power that they killed this man's family. They killed this man's son and his son's family. Every time elections are coming up and you hear about candidates or people close to candidates dying, it's no coincidence. It's no coincidence. It 100% was a hit and nothing more. So when I tell you that these hit teams will start going active once Trump starts making more moves against them, especially publicly. I'm not joking. So I thought this would be interesting to share with you. Excuse me. Considering the fact that I just demonstrated that there are armed individuals out there who are willing to commit violence. They're racist, they're bigoted, they're wicked, they're evil, they're dumb, so they have a propensity for violence. And the shit that they believe in, the ideologies that they believe in, affords them justifications for committing harm against certain people of a certain ideology, of a certain race, etc., etc. And this guy, this serial killer, Danny Rolling, he gave some basic instructions on how to not get murdered by a serial killer. And I read it before, and in reading it, I come to learn that a lot of these precautions and measures are also measures you can take in a time like this when political violence is on the rise and certain individuals may become targets of that political violence and will have to defend themselves. So, how to not get murdered by a serial killer, according to serial killer Danny Rolling. But I guess in this sense, I would call it how to not get murdered by a transgender political ideologue by serial killer Danny Rolling. Rolling murdered 5 students in Gainesville, Florida over 4 days in August 1990. And he says, park your car in the light. Buy yourself a 38 caliber revolver. Get a permit to carry it on your person and put it in your handbag where it's easy to get to. Buy some mace on a keychain and have it ready when you get out of your car. If your bedroom window doesn't have a screen, get one and nail it to the window. Place a bunch of empty glass bottles in the windows. Get you some curtains. Excuse me. Buy a deadbolt and put it on your bedroom door so you can lock yourself in. Sleep with your 38 caliber revolver under your pillow. Well, I wouldn't suggest that. I would probably suggest that you sleep with it in your nightstand, at least within reach of where you sleep. Like if you're getting a new bed, get a bed with a headboard that has compartments in it and put it in one of those compartments. But anyway, it won't go off by accident. If someone bothers you, don't ever let an attacker get control. Fight for your life. Scream as loud as you can. Spray mace in his face. Kick him in the balls. Scratch his eyes. Pull your 38 caliber and blow him away. Take it from one who knows. It pays to be paranoid. Shout out to my brother D. Allen on the Cash App. We got 2 so far. He says, much love and respect, citizen man. Appreciate you, D. Allen. So these are some basic pointers on how to avoid being killed by a serial killer. But a lot of serial killers share a similar mental pathology, I guess would be the word, as these radical leftist liberals. And so the way a serial killer would operate in targeting his victims and preying on his victims wouldn't be very different from the way a political ideologue would target and prey on his victims, right? There's some level of premeditation. There's a plan of attack. There's a strategy of execution, shit like that. And of course, there's always some unresolved issues that they're dealing with, which drives them to become mentally insane ideologues. But a lot of these precautions might actually be helpful to you in the future because, again, We got elections coming up in 2026. We got more elections coming up in 2028. And if these liberal lefties are getting violent now, if the military can't clamp down on all of them soon enough, by 2028, they're going to literally be out there trying to wage war because they have nothing left. They don't have an intellectual leg to stand on. And again, from those man on the street interviews, as we all seen, when they can't debate you anymore, they attack you physically. So as they start to lose the political war and lose the political debate and lose support from the people and lose popularity, their followers are more likely to become violent. And this is why all that propaganda over the last couple of years of the Democrats being, having high approval ratings and Trump having low approval ratings and the Democrats being more favored by the American people than Trump and all this stupid shit, and the Democrats are winning politically and all that. That's why none of that propaganda actually stuck, right? Because while the fake news was trying to convince us that the left was winning, the actions of the liberals on the street clearly demonstrated that they were losing. It's like you're in a basketball game. It's the fourth quarter. If you have a comfortable lead, you're not going to be running a full court press. You're not going to be trying to rush the ball up the court. You're not going to be, double teaming and, trying to corner the guy with the ball to try to steal possession and all that. You're going to hold on to that ball as long as you can. You're going to run up the clock as much as you can, but you're going to do it in a comfortable headspace, and you're going to be more relaxed about it because you're already in the lead. So you're not going to fight. You're not going to play as hard because you're in the lead and you don't have to. But let's say you're the other team that's down 5 points and there's, 45 seconds left in the game. They're going to be the ones running the full court press. They're going to be the ones scrambling. They're going to be the ones double teaming, trying to get possession and trying to force that turnover. They're going to be the ones throwing up desperate shots. They're going to be the ones looking for the fast breaks. They're going to be the ones pushing the ball up court at light speed because they're losing. So when you translate that concept to the political world, what do you see? You see conservatives on the right, kind of chilling. In fact, a little too chill and laid back and letting the Democrats walk all over them in a lot of cases, right? But they're not too worried about convincing the public that they're the better candidate. Because the Democrats have been doing such a great job at convincing the world that they were the shitty candidates for office that now the Republicans have a comfortable lead. So they get to chill back and hang on to the ball and pass it around and, shit like that. Meanwhile, on the liberal side of things, they're losing power. So now they got the hit teams. Now they got the transgender mass shooters. Now they're, plotting and if not carrying out, in case of Charlie Kirk, just simply plotting political assassinations. You know what I'm saying? Making public threats. Shooting up schools and all kind of dumb shit because they're losing. You see what I'm saying? So they're fighting harder than anybody else because people aren't believing them anymore. And when they have political candidates like Mamdani that are openly expressing racism, a lot of Americans are burnt out with this racism shit, black and white. People are sick and tired of that racism shit, and the left has been using racism as an excuse for so long in so many scenarios that weren't racist that the word has lost its power. That's essentially what's happened. There was a time when people were afraid of being called racist. Now they don't give a fuck. They gonna call it what it is because it is what it is. And it's crazy. This is the same guy that said he won't make any tax rates higher than 94%, as if a 94% tax rate is reasonable. So now this motherfucker wants to tax you at 94%. So every dollar you make, you got to give the government 94 cents of it. And he wants to impose this on the white people. Guess what? He just lost the collective white vote in the state of New York, in the city of New York. Because even the white people that were left leaning that would have voted for him. But then again, I don't know, because white liberals tend to be consumed with self-hate and white guilt. So they might actually go for that, now that I think about it. Because I'm speaking from a position of like a rational person. But again, to be a liberal lefty and even consider anything a Democrat has to say as being worth listening to, you have to be mentally ill. Like on the one hand, I can't believe that he said this, but on the other hand, I'm not surprised that he said it. You know what I'm saying? Like that alone should disqualify him. Because not only is it an open expression of racism and bigotry, right? Get this. This is also a demonstration of his basic lack of political knowledge. Because in America, thanks to the civil rights movement and our anti-discrimination laws, government cannot use its power to pass legislation to be enforced on a specific group based on certain characteristics, including race, nor can they pass legislation to benefit any specific group based on certain characteristics, including race. So for him to say white neighbors should pay higher property taxes clearly shows that he has no knowledge that the government cannot single out white people and raise their taxes because they're white. And what's funny is even when the racist Bill Clinton and Joe Biden pushed through the crime bill in 94, which was clearly aimed at Black Americans, they knew not to write the word black in the legislation. So what they did was they crafted the legislation in such a way that the application of that legislation would mainly apply to Black people exclusively. And the way they did that was there were two versions of cocaine on the streets. There was cooked up cocaine, which was crack cocaine, and then there was powdered cocaine. And crack cocaine was the Black people's drug of choice to either sell or consume. So crack was more prevalent amongst the Black people, and the powdered cocaine was more prevalent amongst the white people and the wealthier people. So when they crafted the legislation of the crime bill in order to target the Black people, they specified the Black people's drug of choice instead of specifying their race. But they still got the same effect, which was a direct targeting of that specific race. Because those white men, albeit the racist bigots that they were still Americans who understood American law. And they were able to pass legislation to accomplish their racist goal without actually violating American law in the legislative process. Mamdani, on the other hand, has no idea of this intricate aspect of legislation in in the American government. So he publicly says white neighbors should pay higher property taxes and doesn't even realize that not only is he demonstrating hatred and racism and bigotry and the willingness to use power of government to target that certain group of people who he's racist against, which is like communistic to the core. He's also demonstrating a lack of knowledge of American law, which also should be a disqualifying factor. So if the only factor that qualifies him and makes him a favorable candidate is the fact that he doesn't give a fuck enough to go to Israel, when you weigh that, which was cool, I was glad he said it, because all the other puppets up there had Israel's dick down their throat when it was their turn to answer that question. So that was cool. I agreed with that. I was glad he did that. But everything else that he's been proposing has been just as horrible, if not worse, than what those other Democratic candidates that got Israel's dick on their breath. The agenda is no different than what they would have done. And when you weigh that one statement against all the other bullshit he's been saying, that other bullshit wins. So I don't give a fuck that you don't like Israel. I still don't like you because look what you want to do to my country. Look at what you're trying to do to one of the greatest cities in my country. No, fuck you. On behalf of all white people in New York City, fuck you, Zoran Mamdani. And I hope you get primaried. I hope in this case, I hope the Zionist regime primaries him just to get one of their own puppets in. Because this guy's a fucking nut job. I don't even know where he came from. Like the first time I heard his name, I said, what the fuck is a Mamdani? Does anybody know where this guy came from? Like, what was he doing before he became the one of the front runners for the mayor of New York City? Like, who the fuck is this guy? Like, who the hell are any of these damn people, for that matter? But you see the problem. You see the overwhelming supply of problems there with this guy. Yeah, Brian Butler got to be another infiltrator. Barnes says he can't be primaried. Did he win the primary already? Barnes, you seem to know more about this guy than I do. Did he win it? Or like, did everybody else drop out and he's the only one that's going to run against Adams or what? Or is Adams is his term's over? Or I don't know how that goes. The election is Tuesday night. Wait, the election between who though? Like the primary election between him and the other Democratic candidates? Or is it the election between him and Eric Adams? That's where I'm getting confused. Like, what stage in the elections are they? What stage are they at? It's him, Cuomo, and Silva. Oh, so it's a primary election? So as in whoever wins goes up against Adams? Or is Adams out and whoever wins becomes the mayor? So Adams is out and whoever wins becomes mayor then, basically. I haven't been following it, so I need you guys to tell me. Okay, winner take all. Okay. So that means Adams is out and whoever wins becomes mayor. Got it. Okay, cool. That's what I wanted to know. Thank you guys. Barnes and Brian Butler, you guys are great, man. See, this is why I like having an intelligent audience. I don't understand how these guys that are supposed to be intellectuals like can enjoy and feed off of the energy of having a dumbed down audience as they sit there and lie to them and tell them bullshit and watch all these people like believe their bullshit. You know what I'm saying? I don't understand how these guys can live with themselves with an audience like that. I can't do that. I need smart people. I need to be, let me say this. I need to be the dumbest person in the room. Even though I'm not usually not the dumbest person in the room, I never ever want to be the smartest person in the room because then there's nothing for you to learn. There's nothing for you to take away from being in that room once you leave. So if you're the smartest person in the world, in the room, there's no information in that room that you'll be able to absorb because you think you have it all already. And this is why I like having an intelligent audience or a well-informed audience. Because that way, I'm not the smartest person in the room. And I love it. I mean, how many times I've been, doing shows and then I have to stop and ask you guys a question and within seconds I have an accurate answer. You know what I'm saying? Like, that shit's great. I really enjoy that. That's part of like you guys' level of knowledge is part of what makes this so fun for me because as I'm teaching you, I get to learn from you at the same time. And I think that's mighty fine. That is mighty fine. So this is a funny one. The Secret Service had planned to fire DEI hired agents until an Obama appointed judge ruled it illegal and blocked the firing. So the judge forced Trump to keep the DEI Secret Service agents on the payroll. So Trump assigned the DEI hired agents to protect Obama, Clinton, and Biden, who rejected them and demanded merit based male agents to protect them. The man is a legend. So that's what Trump did. So the Obama appointed judge, who obviously would politically agree with Clinton and Biden, told Trump, you got to keep them DEI agents on the payroll. And Trump said, all right, well, the DEI agents, since Obama and them are so in favor of DEI, give them the DEI agents. And this is a prime demonstration of one, how the Democrats don't believe a fucking thing they preach to you. And it also demonstrates why they don't believe a fucking thing they preach to you. And the reason why they don't believe a thing they preach to you is because whatever it is they're preaching to you, that they're selling to you as if it's something great, it's actually something detrimental. Because the standards they set for you, under the guise of this standard being the highest standard and being the best thing for you, they refuse to hold themselves to the same standard, which clearly indicates that it's not the highest standard and it's definitely not the best standard for you because it's not even good enough for the people proposing it to you. And on the surface, the DEI hired Secret Service agents would be presumably unqualified for the job because DEI is based in hiring based on their characteristics rather than their ability to do the job, whether it be a female or a person of color or whatever the case may be. That trumps their ability to do the job. Thus, it's more of a probability, it's more of a guarantee that under DEI, you would end up with less qualified people because the qualification itself is not the foundational basis for hiring. It's not to say that all DEI hires are unqualified. It's simply to say that the existence of DEI increases the possibility of unqualified people getting those positions. It's almost like affirmative action, right? Where affirmative action forced employers to hire a certain number of black employees. So you would have these qualified black employees on the job doing a good job and would not have gotten the job if they weren't black, essentially, right? But because the affirmative action legislation even existed, it created an atmosphere where these black workers, their white counterparts, would have to look at them with the side eye and wonder if they're actually qualified or not, because there's this government program that exists that requires employers to hire employees based on their race rather than their ability to do the job. Thus, every person of that race who is on the job, their ability is now called into question. Now, in a lot of cases, those questions would be answered by the fact that those black individuals are qualified to do the job. But there will be more cases of unqualified people who happen to be black in those positions. Now, let's say affirmative action didn't exist and employers weren't so racist that we needed affirmative action and they hired black people the same way they hired white people. Without the affirmative action legislation, there is no intellectual argument for why a white employee would question the qualification skills of their black coworker. Because this program that puts black people in positions that they may or may not qualify for doesn't exist. Thus, every black person in that position now, the reasonable assumption would be they got it because they qualified for it. So it removes that shadow of doubt as to whether this person is right for the job or not. And that's the problem with DEI. Now, the practice of diversity, equity, and inclusion based hiring, it doesn't necessarily have to end, and it won't necessarily end. But the official program of DEI itself must be done away with, because that program creates that shadow of doubt as to whether this person who may fall under that DEI category is not qualified. So you remove the category, you remove the doubt. So that means people of color, quote unquote, who are qualified for the job and get the job will be just as respected as their white counterparts, because their white counterparts know that they could not have gotten this job unless they were qualified, because there's no government program in place requiring people to be hired based on anything else other than their ability to do the job. Now, the other aspect to DEI is the fact that it's almost like a code, and it's used as a way to get political left-wing ideologues into certain positions. Because conservatives, we don't believe in DEI. We don't think it's a real thing, and we're actually offended by it if we're offered any benefit by it, because we consider that to be an unfair leg up. In other words, we don't want to win by cheating. But employees who do come into the work field with a belief in DEI, thinking it's a good thing, they most likely tend to be left-wing political ideologues. So just the mere fact that they believe in DEI means that they're left-leaning and they're for the agenda, and they will follow orders if the order was to ever be given. Yeah, Leonard, it's funny you said that, because I was going to get to that as the third aspect of why DEI is bullshit. Now, like Leonard said, DEI benefits white women and disabled vets. It doesn't benefit blacks at all. Well, it benefits black women. I agree with your statement. I just don't agree with the blacks in general. It benefits black women, but it doesn't benefit black men at all. Here's how the hierarchy goes. It's gay white women at the top, number one beneficiaries, lesbian white women, then lesbian black women, then gay white men, straight black women. Then you have the straight white men, and then at the very bottom, straight black men. Straight black men, and then at the very bottom, straight white men. That's how that goes. So white lesbian women get first dibs, black lesbian women get second dibs, then gay white men and straight black women get third dibs. That's how that goes. And then gay black men and straight white women come next. Yeah, straight white men need not apply. And again, one of the main reasons why they discriminate so heavily against straight white men, and they made up all the history about straight white men being the oppressor and all this stupid shit, is because most straight white men tend to lean conservative. So they have to force them out of position and out of power in order to make room for their political ideologues, being the liberals. Now, moving on, I hate to be jumping around so quickly, but let's continue on. The government shutdown is still happening, and Trump actually had the East Wing demolished of the White House, and he's rebuilding a ballroom. And everybody's up in arms, right? Everybody's mad because they're like, well, why is Trump spending all this money, but he can't pay the government employees and blah, 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 right? Then it turns out that everybody that was mad at Trump about it kind of had to put their foot in their mouth, or I guess put their feet in each other's asses. I said foots, because it turns out that that construction project is being privately funded. So no tax money is being spent to build that part of the White House, to build the ballroom. And everybody's up in arms about it because I can understand why. Because at a time like this, when the government shut down and employees aren't getting paid and people are losing their jobs, it's not a good look, right? That's surface level. But when you read between the lines, by that project being privately funded while the government is shut down and not being publicly funded, this demonstrates the collective power of wealth in the hands of the American people. Trump is making a statement by doing this. And the statement that Trump is making is he's basically saying, hey, government, we don't fucking need you. That's essentially the statement that he's making. We can do it privately and with private funding, and it'll get done. It'll get done, and nobody has to get robbed in the process. So it's actually a pretty profound message. And this slide right here kind of seems to play right into that same vein, right? It seems to be on accord with that idea. President Trump just revealed that an anonymous billionaire sent a $130 million check to keep paying our troops during the shutdown. They don't want to be named or recognized, Trump said. That's what real patriotism looks like. No spotlight, no politics, just love for our country and the men and women who defend it. So Trump received $130 million from a single individual to pay the troops during the shutdown. Now, mind you, the monthly budget for the DOD is $6.6 billion. Hang on a second. Yeah, 6.6, that's the monthly payroll. $6.6 billion. $130 million is a drop in the bucket compared to that number. So, yeah, you can go look it up. So, that $130 million to pay the troops, you have to wonder now what troops are being paid with that $130 million, because it cannot be that large of a contingent of Department of Defense. Well, you know what troops are getting paid? The ones that are boots on the ground in these American cities, finding the illegals, finding the trafficked children, breaking up these criminal networks and these organizations, doing these night raids, raiding the tunnels, taking these politicians secretly into custody and all that shit, and these organizers and these funders of the quote unquote resistance, these communists. They're the guys that money is going to go to, because you cannot have these guys actively operating in the field and not getting paid while their personal lives falling apart. It's very difficult to maintain the loyalty of a fighting force if that fighting force is not being given whatever it was that they were promised in exchange for them fighting. So in order to avoid compromising those operations, this billionaire who understands that actually sacrificed $130 million of his own money. Some people say it was Elon Musk. Some people say it was Trump himself. Some people say it was Kanye. I don't know. If I had my guess, I'd probably say Elon Musk. But again, this demonstrates that all that tax money that the government steals from Americans every year, they don't fucking need it. And there's enough wealth in the hands of the American people for the American people to literally control their own government. You know? And it's funny to me how people say, oh, Trump sold out America, Trump sold out America. And those very same people will tell you America been sold out long before Trump. So which one is it? Because both can't be true. So it seems to me like Trump's not selling out America. Trump took over America while it was already sold out, and he's trying to buy the shit back. And now he's got rich friends helping him buy it back. Because if you don't need Congress to pass legislation to allocate funding for the government, and you as the president are able to collect private money that's volunteered to you by American citizens to fund the government, then guess what? Now you can fund, you have the total autonomy to fund whatever you want to fund, shut down whatever you want to shut down, and you don't even need Congress to pass legislation to do it. All you have to do is just cut off their money and watch their system collapse. Because when people aren't getting paid, eventually they'll stop coming to work. And believe it or not, those communist podcasters, they'll tell you, oh, rich people are evil and being rich is bad, while they themselves are fucking rich, by the way. Being rich is evil and the rich people only get rich from exploiting the poor people and blah, 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 blah. Well, that's not necessarily true, because a lot of poor people who got rich will tell you they got rich off of doing business with other rich people. So it's probably the other way around. Rich people create more rich people, and poor people create more poor people. Because if 10 guys worth $100,000 each gave $10,000 to one guy, or gave $5,000 to one guy, now those guys got $95,000 each, and that one guy is up $50,000. So those 10 rich guys, if you call that rich, those 10 rich guys essentially were able to make a broke guy rich like them. But let's say you got 10 broke guys and one rich guy. If that rich guy gives each one of the broke guys $5,000, he's down $50,000. And the broke guys still ain't even broke 5 figures. So when the communists preach to you that somehow being poor is a virtue and being rich is evil, that's that self-sabotage ideology that they're selling you. And this is exactly why the system is designed to keep you stupid and broke. This is why. Because if everybody in America was sitting on a large amount of money, had probably like $1 million each, and all the conservatives that support Trump, which is the overwhelming majority of the population, by the way, because crazy people are a small percentage of the population, and we all decided to put our money together and say, here, Trump, run the government. We now represent ourselves. You realize that? Because he'll have to ask us directly, what do you want me to do with this money? So if the government is for sale, why the fuck don't we buy it? And this is what I've been preaching for years. If you're mad about what the people in your government are doing with the power of your government, it is incumbent upon you, the people, to attain that power for yourself, to seize that power for yourself and do the right thing with it. That's the only way to stop the abuse of power by the corrupt individuals, is to replace them with non-corrupt individuals. That's the only way to do it. So if the corrupt individuals are controlling the government by buying off politicians, the government's shut down right now. That means that shit's on the auction block. And did this headline say Trump turned down 130 million, or did he take the 130 million? And did he do what that person wanted him to do with it? Yes, he did. Because he who payeth the bills maketh the rules. So if we all could get out of that self-sabotage mindset and get on our grind and get on our job and get on our hustle and start making this bread, we can build wealth for ourselves. And in the future, we can fund the government and we can directly control the government. And we don't have to fire nobody. We don't have to go to no judge, no court, or anything. All we got to do is cut off the fucking money. So if your country is for sale, that's how you control it. You control it by buying it. It's literally that simple. It's literally that simple. Every time we see a corrupt politician, what's the first thing we say? Oh, he must be paid off. He's bought and paid for. Yeah, because the motherfucker's for sale. So instead of complaining about who bought him, you buy him. Stupid. That's what I wanted to talk about with this. So the French president, Emmanuel Macron, has been under fire by Candace Owens, accusing his quote-unquote wife of being a man. So we got a Barack Obama, Michelle Obama situation happening in France. I'm sure you guys know. Now, this isn't of any real significance. And honestly, these two are liberal lefties. And if the liberal left is all about the rainbow life and the gay life and being gay is cool, then there's no reason why this should be a scandal. But for some reason, Emmanuel Macron and his husband wife have decided to try to defend themselves against Candace Owens's allegations. They filed a lawsuit. They came to America with all kinds of evidence to prove this man is a woman, which is fucking stupid. Because the accusation is this woman is actually a man. And the defense of that accusation is no, this woman is that man's sister. So on one side, they're saying that man and this woman is the same person. And on the other, on the Macron side, they're saying, no, this woman has a brother who is a man and they're two different people. So what would be the best way to prove that she's a woman? Wouldn't it be better to just come out in a picture like this with her so-called brother and show us that there's two of them? Because she has yet to do that. And it's been about, 2.5 years, 3 years since Candace has been on this trail. But oddly enough, when liars lie and truthers keep harping on the truth, eventually the truth comes out and the liars are revealed to be liars. Because we know that this is a man. I mean, you can look at him and tell that's a man. His fucking shoulders are wider than Emmanuel Macron's shoulders. Like, come on. French President Emmanuel Macron's wife, Brigitte Macron, discovered that her tax account on France's official government website listed her as a male under the name of Jean-Michel. And that's supposed to be the name of the brother who she claims she is the sister of. So just like Michelle Obama in the, I think it was like a will left from Michelle Obama's mother when she died, and listed Michelle as her son, Michael. Because you see, when these men change their identities and try to parade themselves around as women, it's very hard to convince the world that they are women, because there's so much documentation that you accumulate by the time you become an adult that it's always a high possibility that you're going to miss something. You're going to miss altering some document that have you listed as who you really are. And if that debate of you being a woman versus you being a man becomes a public debate and people start looking into it enough, eventually that documentation that you forgot to alter will be found, and it will surface, and it will torpedo your entire lie. What up, Motor Wolf? And this is exactly what's happening with Brigitte Macron. We know she's a man. Now there's documentation confirming she's a man. So Candace Owens, regardless of how you may feel about her at the current moment, when it comes to this particular subject, she was 100% spot on. So shout out to Candace for that. Bunch of fucking freaks and perverts, man. The liberal left is nothing but a bunch of freaks and perverts. Now, let's talk about this gambling bust, because this is a pretty big deal. Let me see how far. Okay, good. So we're 2 hours in. Cool. So the FBI news conference on sports gambling bust. So the sports gambling bust involved a bunch of New York crime families. And the basketball coach, Chauncey Billups, he was also indicted in the operation. Let me see. There's a slide that I have here with a few details, and then I'll look up an article or maybe a video. The mafia was allegedly paying Portland Trailblazers coach Chauncey Billups to be a face to attract high rollers to rigged poker games with X-ray tables. Some players had contact lenses that could read through cards. This is wild. That is wild. That is wild, and that is crazy. So let's take a look. Let me see if I can pull something on this. Let me see. FBI gambling bust. It should give me the latest on it. Inside the federal gambling case that ensnared NBA stars 3 days ago. Update, 3 days, 2 days. NFL should be concerned about NBA gambling arrest. Yeah, they damn sure should be. Everything's from 3 days ago. U.S. charges. Okay, this is New York Times. This is FBI. Crime and corruption in sports and gaming. That's nothing current. Let's see what NPR's got. FBI, that's 4 days ago. 3 days ago. All right, let's see what the BBC says. They usually get pretty in-depth, so let's see. BBC News and 2 black guys on the cover. Ain't that funny? Ironic. It's ironic. NBA stars and mafia among more than 30 arrested in illegal gambling crackdown. Summary: NBA stars Chauncey Billups, Terry Rozier, and Damon Jones are among those arrested in 2 illegal gambling cases, according to the FBI. Jones, a former NBA player, is one of 3 overlapping defendants across both cases, prosecutors say. Excuse me. One case alleges 6 defendants, including Rozier, used insider information, and in some cases, players altered their performances to manipulate bets. Yeah, I heard about that. There was actually one guy that got arrested because what he would do is he would bet, and I think I covered this story. He would bet against himself and then get on the court and basically throw the game. Which, in theory, sounds pretty genius, but in practice, it was quite idiotic. There we go. The second alleges 31 defendants, including Billups, participated in a scheme carrying out rigged illegal poker games with the involvement of organized crime families. Wow. The NBA says Billups and Rozier are being placed on immediate leave. Rozier's lawyer says the player looks forward to winning this fight. FBI Director Kash Patel says the mind-boggling fraud involved tens of millions of dollars across many years. Officials outlined the charges in detail at a news conference earlier. Okay. So here's what happened. There are two indictments. Okay. So what officials say? Let's check that out. Here's what officials say. Officials allege Rozier faked an injury and collaborated with others to bet based on non-public information about athletes and teams. The defendants allegedly placed hundreds of thousands of dollars in fraudulent bets. In the other case, investigators say Billups and others targeted victims to play in rigged poker games backed by notorious crime families. They allegedly scammed people out of millions of dollars by using X-ray poker tables and pre-marked cards. Here's what we still don't know: who the victims are, how each of the defendants pled in the cases, plead to the charges, which other players, celebrities, or prominent figures are involved in either case. So let me see if I could find something on the mafia crime families. Oh, I don't need that tab. Let me see something. Because I heard the names mentioned, but I can't remember them all. So mafia families involved in FBI gambling bust. Okay. In the recent FBI illegal gambling bust, authorities indicted members and associates of 4 of New York's 5 families. And I think it was the Colombo family was the only family that didn't get caught up in this. The investigation, announced in October 2025, involved 2 separate but connected schemes: a rigged poker operation and illegal sports betting involving current and former NBA figures. All right, here we go. So the Bonanno crime family, members and associates were accused of organizing and providing security for illegal rigged poker games. Gambino crime family, members and associates were involved in running and enforcing the rigged poker games. Genovese crime family, individuals from this family allegedly participated in the gambling schemes and helped enforce debts. So the Genoveses were the debt collectors. Lucchese crime family. Associates of this family were accused of participating in the rigged poker operations. So, details of the operation. Let's look at the details. And guys, don't forget to hit the Cash App and support the show. Shout out to my brother Motor Matt with the $5 challenge on the Cash App. He said, let's go. So we got a $5 challenge, y'all. We got 3 on the board. We need 7 more. So rigged poker games. These high-stakes games took place in locations across the country, including New York City, Vegas, and Miami. The criminal enterprise used technology like manipulated shuffling machines and hidden cameras to cheat victims out of millions of dollars. Enforcement. The mob families allegedly collected a cut of the profits and used threat, intimidation, and violence to ensure that losing players paid their debts. In one instance, a member of the Bonanno family allegedly robbed a competitor at gunpoint. Recruiting face cards. The scheme's organizers allegedly used well-known NBA players and coaches, referred to as face cards, to attract wealthy fish or victims to the rigged tables. That's right, Motor Matt. Let them know $1, anything helps Citizen Man with this live. Appreciate that, Motor Matt. Sports betting scheme. Excuse me. In a separate but connected indictment, individuals were accused of using confidential insider information to place illegal bets on NBA games. Now, the question is, how would the FBI have found out about all this? Well, it's very simple. Somebody got busted first and they told. In total, 13 members and associates of the Bonanno, Gambino, Genovese, and Lucchese crime families were indicted in the bust. Somebody told. That's usually how these things always go. Somebody fucking told. So that's big news, and that comes right after we hear about the bust in Osceola County, Florida, where the Osceola County sheriff got arrested for illegal gambling. I think they told. I think the sheriff down in Osceola County, I think he told. I think he was the one that told. So Phil Cantrell, he dropped this. He says, LA declares state of emergency after Trump's ICE raids exposed tunnels, safe houses, and foreign-backed trafficking hubs hidden inside sanctuary programs. So they found the tunnels and the safe houses. Now, you notice how Phil says ICE raids expose the tunnels and safe houses. It didn't say discovered the tunnels and the safe houses, because the military discovered the tunnels and the safe houses, and the ICE raids, because they're civilian operations, they now expose it. You see how that works? This is exactly what I was explaining to you earlier. Los Angeles is collapsing under the weight of what Trump's forces just uncovered: a sanctuary system masking global trafficking and financial laundering operations buried beneath immigration aid. On October 14th, 2025, county supervisors voted 4-1 to activate emergency powers. The pretext: protecting immigrants. The truth: shielding an international criminal network now being dismantled by Trump's federal task force. These aren't routine raids, they're seizures. And this also speaks to what I was telling you guys about these ICE raids. They're not just going after the illegals, they're going after the organizers, the funders, the aiders, and the abettors all at once. Hard drives, offshore account lists, tunnel maps, hard drives, offshore account lists, tunnel maps. Hang on a second. Maybe I'm missing something. Okay. This guy just writes with bad grammar and punctuation. But anyway, hard drives, offshore account lists, tunnel maps. ICE operations are synchronized with military-grade intelligence units under Trump's directive. Again, I told you guys that before too. What's being exposed in an infrastructure of crime that used undocumented populations as cover for funding pipelines, trafficking rings, and foreign intelligence infiltration. Over 113 arrests so far, all linked to NGOs, fake charities, and tenant aid groups funded by EU and World Economic Forum aligned donors. Many of these arrests aren't migrants, right? They're American citizens. That's why Homeland Security Investigations, HSI, was doing the raids, accompanying ICE on those raids, because they were American citizens also involved with these illegals, and they had to be taken in by Homeland Security while ICE took in the migrants. Or should I say, the illegal aliens. Their handlers. Some have aliases going back 15 years. Behind them, a system built to engineer chaos and control votes while laundering billions through fake relief funds. When ICE moved in, the network struck back. Protests were triggered, not organic. They were activated. Remember, people were being paid to fund and organize these protests. Molotovs, vandalism, looting, all mapped to the same zones ICE had raided days earlier. A controlled response. The city called for curfews. Newsom sued Trump to stop the National Guard deployment. But behind the lawsuits lies fear. Exposure of an underground grid wired for global operations. Shelters labeled humanitarian had biometric scanners, encrypted servers, and tunnels leading to freight depots. Many were built with COVID funds. Federal investigators say these sites were used for organ trafficking, data collection, and child transport linked to cartels. Supervisor Catherine Barger opposed the emergency order. She's now under threat. 3 break-ins since the vote. Landlords are furious as another moratorium crushes them, this time to hide the exodus of operatives fleeing before they testify. Trump's ICE isn't alone. Cyber and financial warfare units from the Pentagon are tracing crypto flows tied to these NGOs. It's not about deportations anymore. It's system takedown. Every seized drive, every encrypted file leads upward. City Hall, Hollywood, Silicon Valley. Los Angeles declared an emergency not to save people, but to barricade the truth. The global machine is being unplugged, and Trump's storm has only just begun. So let me see what I can find on this. First, let's look up LA declares state of emergency. October 14th, Los Angeles County declares state of emergency over immigration raids. So that's what they're claiming it's about. But again, with the illegal immigration, it's helping them to fund and expand their criminal networks. So declaring that emergency is to protect their criminal networks. LA County officials voted on Tuesday to declare a state of emergency over ongoing federal immigration raids. The proclamation gives the county the power to assist residents they say have been impacted financially by immigration and customs enforcement action. And by help, what do they mean? Not sure. The declaration perhaps help financially or help hide them, help move them from location to location, could mean anything. The declaration was introduced by County Supervisor Lindsay P. Horvath and Janice Hahn and passed by a 4-1 vote with Supervisor Catherine Barger opposing. And now Catherine Barger is under threat. You see how they work? They use violence and intimidation because they're terrorists. LA County is home to over 3 million immigrants, according to supervisors who said the ICE raids have caused widespread fear and led to decreased attendance at workplaces, disruption of local economies, and strain on critical services such as schools, hospitals, and places of worship. Well, good. You shouldn't have been so dependent on illegals, knowing they were illegals. Rent relief for tenants who have fallen behind as a result of the ICE raids and money for legal aid and other services are among the provisions in the declaration. The vote on Tuesday allows county supervisors to mobilize resources, request state and federal financial assistance to respond to the impacts of the raids, and expedite contracting to address the crisis. What's happening in our communities is an emergency, and Los Angeles County is treating it like one, said Horvath in a Horace, in a press release. Declaring a local emergency ensures that the full weight of the county government is aligned to support our immigrant communities who are being targeted by federal actions. So, again, declared the emergency to protect the illegals. ICE raids started in LA early June, prompting demonstrations that at the time turned violent. While President Donald Trump's deportation, at least they call him the president at ABC, deportation push was initially said to be centered around undocumented immigrants with criminal records. An ABC News analysis of data in July showed that the administration has arrested an increasing number of migrants with no criminal convictions. Well, that's because they're not migrants, nor are they immigrants. They are illegal aliens. So you can call them whatever the fuck you want to call them. Doesn't change the fact that they're in violation of the law and need to be held accountable. Correct? I would hope you guys would agree with that. I'm sure you would. For months, families have lived under threat and workers have been taken from job sites, Horvath continues. So their whole claim to pass this emergency is to protect the illegals because the illegals' lives are being ruined and they're being, arrested and deported and ripped away from their families, and all the sob stories that they tell. But according to that post I just showed you, let me go back to it. According to this post from what's that brother's name? Phil Cantrell, it seems like there's a lot more to it than just them wanting to protect the illegals. Because with this illegal alien problem, they have, again, expanded their criminal networks, their trafficking networks, and so on, and also are able to solicit funds for their quote unquote crime prevention 501c3 organizations. So they need the crime because they depend on it. They live off of it. They profit from it. They can't pay for their mansions off their government salary. They got to have that side money. All right, so let's see here. ICE raids. Shit. ICE raids. Expose tunnels in LA. Let's see what we got on that. Huh. So in response, this right here seems to be in direct response of Phil Cantrell's post. And this is from Yahoo. Oh, it's Snopes. Of course. They're fake checkers. Report claims LA County declared state of emergency because ICE discovered tunnels, trafficking hubs. What we know. All right. In October 2025, after Los Angeles County declared a state of emergency, a claim circulated that the reason behind the declaration was that immigration and customs enforcement raids exposed. Now, that seems to be word for word what was in that post I just read to you. So let's see if the fake checkers even feel the need to fake check it. The claim appeared to come from an article on GazetteTeller.com, an independent news website that takes article submissions from readers. According to that article, departments of defense and justice were assisting ICE in an investigation into an alleged concealed logistic U.S. for dark money globalist data tracking operations and, in some cases, organ harvesting. ICE had reportedly discovered that the network during its raids leading the local government, Los Angeles County, to attempt to block further federal access through a state of emergency declaration, according to GazetteTeller.com. Los Angeles County Supervisor Lindsay P. Horvath and Janice Hahn, who co-introduced the state of emergency declaration, dismissed the article via email as absurd. So the same Democrats that allegedly passed a state of emergency or proposed a state of emergency to protect the criminal network are claiming that the existence of the criminal network is not so. Well, that would make sense, because if you ask a member of the mafia crime family, if you're a member of the mafia crime family, they'll say, ha, 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 that's absurd. Crime families don't exist anymore. So that would be a typical response from a guilty party. Snopes could not independently verify Gazette Teller's claim. We reached out to the federal departments and agencies named in the article to ask if they could confirm the reported details and await a reply. In October 2025, a claim archive circulated online that LA County declared a state of emergency after ICE raids exposed tunnels, blah, 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 blah. Los Angeles County includes dozens of cities in Southern California, the most populous of which is Los Angeles. County supervisors voted to declare a state of emergency on October 14th after ICE ramped up enforcement actions in June. Okay, we got that already. Okay, so there's Michael Savage reposting it. Rocco Bianconi. And Michael Savage is actually a pretty notable talking head. So Michael Savage reposted it. Chances are it's probably true. And I believe it is. Because why would Snopes even post the article if it was nonsense? You see, whenever the so-called conspiracy theorists put out something that's actually true, that the establishment doesn't want you to know, they immediately get their fact checkers on it and they make this a subject of conversation in order to try to debunk it or downplay it. But whenever something's put out that isn't true, the establishment will allow it to circulate, allow it to spread. They won't challenge it because we, the people, will do our research and discover that it's fake, but not until after it's been circulated and thousands of people, if not millions, have been fooled and deceived by it. So they use it as a form of disinformation. Now, when it's real information, they try to shut it down and fact check it immediately. When it's false information, it usually originates from them. All right, so there ain't that much on Google about the tunnels. But again, we've been hearing about the tunnels over and over again over the years, even down to let me do something else here. I'm going to show you guys something else. This is the main reason why I don't downplay the talk about the tunnels. Watch this. DOD. Trains for underground warfare. Did I misspell it? The DoD trains for underground warfare through a multifaceted approach, including building specialized training facilities that use modular container-based tunnels and investing hundreds of millions of dollars in training and equipment. Training simulates conditions like darkness, poor air quality, and limited communication, and soldiers learn to use specialized gear such as suppressed weapons, night vision, and air monitors. You see that? So that means that the military actually was trained to fight in tunnels and conduct operations underground. And so when we hear news from non-mainstream sources discussing the discovery of tunnels and tunnels used for human trafficking, you can't take it off the table because it's the military and the Joint Special Operations Task Force that is assigned to combat the human trafficking operations. And the Joint Special Operations Task Force just so happens to consist of units that have participated in this underground training. So not only do we have the rumors being circulated by the quote unquote conspiracy theorists and the blatant denials by the mainstream media, but we also have the Department of Defense themselves who have already openly and publicly announced that, yes, we are training to fight in that terrain. And this happened in 2019. The training started, the announcement of the training was first published in February of 2019. And if you put a 2-year delta on that, that'd take you back to February of 2017. Right when Trump took office was probably when they started all the training. And when the operations had already commenced by 2019, that's when it was publicly announced that, hey, we are fighting underground. We are training to fight underground. So when it comes to this business with the tunnels, it's hard for me to write it off as nonsense and as bullshit because the Department of Defense does not train for bullshit. They train their personnel in the terrain in which they plan on operating in. And if they're training to fight underground, that means they're either operating or planning to operate underground because the training is ongoing. Because once they get down into those tunnels, they will encounter things that they did not expect to encounter and that they had not trained for. So that requires updated training. So when these obstacles are later encountered, either by the same units or future deployed units, they know how to handle those situations. Rumor has it that there are what we would call monsters down there, like quote unquote mutated creatures that are violent and ravenous and live down in the darkness and are adapted to live in the darkness. There are units of armed combatants down there. And there is also victims of the trafficking, i.e. hostages down there. There's also bodies and corpses and putrid air quality. Low lighting. So before you start thinking that the tunnel stuff is nonsense and the tunnel stuff is all made up and it's all bullshit, just remember this. If it was bullshit, Department of Defense wouldn't be spending all that money to train for it. And that right there should be your number one indicator that this tunnel stuff is for real. That right there, that is your indicator. Underground. So anyway, guys, we're going to have some more to discuss on the next show. I think that's all for tonight. I'm a little disappointed because we only got 3 donors on the board. It's a little depressing, but it's all good. I do appreciate you guys who do support the show. You know, maybe you just didn't have it tonight or didn't feel like I deserved it tonight. Whatever the case may be, maybe I'll do a better job in earning it next time. Hold on. But I do appreciate you being here. and hitting that like button. That means a lot in itself, so don't feel bad. And for those of you who just weren't able to donate, I wish you much financial success in the future, because the more money you make is the more you can donate to me. So my own selfish greed is driving me to wish you the best. So greed is not necessarily a bad thing. All right. But anyway, if in case we get zapped over here on Citizen Man TV, make sure you go follow me on Citizen Man. I don't have much content on that page. It's mostly a blank page, but just go subscribe so you can stay connected with me. All right. Also, make sure you guys follow me on Rumble. If you haven't followed me on Rumble yet, get over to Rumble. It's fast, it's free. All you need is an email address, and you create a Rumble account. You come back to the page and you click that follow button. You watch the videos, you hit the thumbs up. And I strongly recommend you go to Rumble, because if you like the content on YouTube, there is 523, I think, about 500, just about 523 to 525 videos on Rumble, which are 99% live streams, long form, that you can watch and gain a lot of knowledge and information from. So don't pass up on that opportunity to gain that knowledge, acquire that knowledge, and get that information. And the reason why there's so much more content on Rumble than YouTube, of course, as you all know, is because of the censorship on YouTube. So every once in a while, I got to scrap all my YouTube videos off YouTube, but I can keep them up on Rumble because Rumble actually allows real free speech. So make sure you follow me on Rumble. That's where you'll find the majority and the bulk of my content. Yeah, forget the books. Also, if you guys, last but not least, if you guys would like to support the show, you could do so by sending in a kind donation via Cash App, PayPal, or Venmo. The red X through the PayPal is just to remind you that PayPal censors comments, and they will try to steal your money by shutting down your account. So please be mindful to keep the comments at the surface level on PayPal. But the links are, the tags are scrolling across the screen in the banner right below. The links are pinned to the top of the YouTube chat. And you can also find the links posted in the description box of every video. And I want to give a shout out to, my brother B Miles for hitting my Cash App I want to say like last week or something. So shout out to B Miles for that. That was during one of my down periods when I was missing a bunch of shows and shit, because, well, life be lifing. But I would like to shout out my brother Nick the Artist, my brother D. Allen Warren, and my brother Motor Matt for the Cash Apps tonight. I appreciate you guys' support. That was pretty awesome, pretty kind of you guys, because we started off slow. You know, there was like 0 on the board, and you guys came through and put us on the board. So shout out to y'all for that support. And anybody else that may support during the replay, I'll make sure to be mindful enough to shout you out on the next show. All right. So don't feel bad. Don't feel left out. And shout out to my replay viewers. And with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, ladies and gents, with that being said, I want to thank you guys for being here. I appreciate the love and the support. And I'll see you on the next one. Citizen Man, out.